Hi everyone, you are watching Procurement and Supply Chain Live, and joining us next is Rob Bonner. He's the Senior Global Procurement Director of Digital at BP. Rob has successfully built new teams from greenfield and driven new approaches through transformation of procurement in existing organisations to deliver change. He's led high-performing teams globally to exceed organisational goals and deliver significant value, and has worked in a number of industries, including oil and gas, automotive, pharma, FMCG, and with wide experience in both direct and indirect procurement. So a perfect guest for us today. Welcome to the show, Rob.
Thank you very much, Scott. Pleasure to be here.
Great to have you here, Rob. We appreciate you taking the time. And today, the topic of our conversation is around strategic sourcing. So for you, what would you say is the number one priority when it comes to that?
I'd say that the waves of crisis that we've seen in supply chain kind of bring to the fore the idea that strategic sourcing probably has multiple strands to it now, Scott. So I'd say probably looking at strategic sourcing not as one approach, but being a combination of multiple approaches is what I would say is the priority today, is to say which vendors are you going to partner with? So who are going to be absolutely critical to your future strategic success? Which vendors are you going to, let's say, qualify or quantify as being strategic? Therefore, you probably have to manage the risk. You have to make sure that they are able to supply you to be able to continue your business. And then which vendors are you probably going to manage metrics with, look at KPIs and metrics there and track performance management, but they're let's say the lower rung of strategic sourcing, or strategic vendors, and therefore when you look at sourcing, to look at strengthening those partnership relationships, ensuring that you've got continuity of supply and risk management in the middle layer, and then looking at different approaches to strategic sourcing with the lower rung, and so I think it's really making sure that you're aware of the way in which you are implementing strategic sourcing that is the number one priority today, given the challenges that we have faced and will continue to face.
Yeah, and bearing in mind those challenges, would you say that strategic sourcing is probably more important now than ever?
I think I would jump on the bandwagon and say yes, Scott, but at the same time, I'd be realistic about the fact it's always been important. Yeah, I'd say that when I take those three different areas of, let's say, strategic approaches to vendors, I'd say obviously risk management's always been important, but right now it's at the forefront of our mind. So we've probably it's also another cliche to say we've never faced such unprecedented challenges, but it kind of feels like it, doesn't it? We look at what we're facing right now, and we're facing an acceleration of huge challenges that are hitting us at a rate at which I certainly can't remember from the last 20 years. And we have had, challenges before, but we're really seeing them coming together and being of significant magnitude now. So I'd say that risk management piece, yes, definitely. I also see the way that a lot of businesses are approaching strategy and understanding the unlocking of that strategy with key vendors as being something that's probably at the forefront of people's minds a lot more than it used to be, and so it's a great enabler for procurement to bring value through that strategic sourcing. So to be able to show the business that that third-party landscape can really drive our strategy forward in such incredible ways, there's a great opportunity now. So I'd say risk management gives us a great platform. The opportunity is really in that partnership piece and showing people the enablement that third parties can bring.
Okay, that's a really good answer. I like that. Now, excuse me, as well as all the disruption and risk that we're experiencing, obviously sustainability is really high on the agenda as well. Yes. So when you're considering total cost, how much weight do you give ESG issues?
Yeah, and so obviously my current role, we're absolutely determined to drive the net zero agenda in our organization and enabling it in whatever we can do for either our customers or the world in as a whole. And so I'd say that definitely the reason I took this role is because the ESG agenda was so large, yeah, and so it makes a huge impact on every sourcing decision that we take. But I think that's actually replicated in most organizations, as you say. So there is a real awakening and an awareness, and particularly when I say about that opportunity for strategic partnership, procurement has a great opportunity right now that people are actually turning to us as they understand about the different scopes of emissions, and they say, well, actually, look, the supply chain emissions that can be, particularly significant in most organizations, and procurement are really able to drive that. So through our strategic sourcing is how we will affect that overall emissions of our organization. And so I'd say that we see huge opportunities, we see huge development there. And if we look at your particular question about weighting, if we look at people implementing like a carbon budget or a cost of carbon as part of their total cost analysis, we've always done, total cost analysis anyway, whether it was the olden days, we had low cost countries. We said, oh, let's go sourcing in low cost countries. Then we said, okay, lowest delivered cost. And now we're it's always been TCO, but with slightly different focus. And now we're focusing in on adding in that carbon cost as part of that TCO. And I think, well, most of the procurement people I talk to are doing that. Yeah. But in particular, I know we are doing it, is to say, look, how do we make sure that we factor in that ESG as a, maybe one behind safety and risk. Yeah. So we say, look, safety, it definitely trumps everything. Yeah. But then carbon is definitely number two, above cost, above actual dollar cost. Yeah. In that prioritization.
Okay. Interesting. And moving on to technology, actually, because technology is a big topic of the conference today. What part can artificial intelligence and machine learning play in this?
Well, so in terms of our daily job, then I'm probably not. I'm not maybe so concerned as I've seen others, writing some clickbait articles, etc., about how the robots are coming for our jobs, etc. But there is a significant part of what we do that we don't like doing, that in actual fact is repetitive, that is that can be automated. And of course, AI can, ML can obviously take away a huge part of that, hopefully. AI can then take that repetitive activity and feed us with the intelligence that enables us to actually convert that into something strategic and something interesting, right? Now, you remember, Scott, the old days where we had everything in Excel, and then we thought it was a breakthrough that we started putting it into Access, yeah? And then so, oh yeah, brilliant, here we go, and start, having a look at how we can start to, let's say, manipulate that data and that spend cube to try to derive trends or themes, key themes, etc., that would really help us to do a proper sourcing exercise, a nice bit of strategic sourcing. And I'd say, look, AI and ML, yes, we're all talking about them at the moment. Properly applied, they can be absolutely groundbreaking. So if we talk about, just to throw one in, Scott, I've heard some say I'm stealing it, but say AI only works if it's not AI as in another individual. Yeah. So if you outsource the problem and you just get someone else to crank the data for you, yes, that can help you. But really, true AI, real artificial intelligence, where you say, right, we give it the data, it cleanses the data, it shows us where we need to change the inputs. It then takes that information and it is able to draw inferences and trends and pull out either trends on the data it sees or trends on the data it doesn't see. So where the gaps are and what it is that you need to do to actually bolster that, those pieces can be really groundbreaking. And I'd say that there's still great strides to be taken there. We're on the journey, yeah, and but I think there's still a long way to go. And I'm encouraged, when we say about the explosion of procurement tech that we've seen over the last couple of years. That explosion of procurement tech is really incredible, yeah. And then the next wave of that is AI and ML. So pulling all of those trends together, all of those strands, rather than trends, pulling those strands together and being able to use AI and ML to feed the information into the right places, pull it from the right places, and then translate and draw inferences from that, I think is the future of procurement tech. So I'm encouraged that we're on the right journey.
Well, that's the theory, obviously, but do you think the practice will be that good?
Hey, I think we'll definitely go on the curve, right? So I don't know if you look at it, Scott, but I always think of blockchain, right? So blockchain, 5 years ago, I got really excited, maybe even longer, when everyone said, it's going to change everything. Your contracts, so it'll be, completely the way you do contracting and redlining the contracts will be completely changed, and we're going to use it for absolutely everything, and traceability, etc. And I have to admit, I went down the disillusionment, and I'm on the upturn again. And I'll tell you why I'm on the upturn is because I see some really interesting applications in ESG. So I got really excited about raw material traceability. So if we look at particularly heavy metals and the origins of heavy metals, etc., that we're all going to be using in, let's say, a circular way with regards to battery tech or things like that, right? But that and so I see people making great strides immediately there, but I also see a great opportunity for that to break out into other materials that we're using, because we all have traceability questions, and particularly when you want to put in ESG considerations on those materials, then blockchain has a great part to play in that, I believe. And I think that can be a real great application of that tech. So where maybe some like AI and ML, you might say it could go the blockchain journey where it's a solution looking for a problem. I actually see a problem that it can solve now. And so I'm encouraged again. And I'd say exactly the same thing for AI and ML. My joke about the AI sometimes just being another individual, I've seen some applications of that where I really don't believe it's AI. It's just getting some other people to count the numbers for us. I think I'm starting to come through that though now, and I see in that explosion of procurement tech, people really using AI and ML. And so, yes, I am encouraged still, Scott, maybe naively, but I'm excited again. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good. That's good to hear. I mean, blockchain is, it's a classic example for me as well. It was like blockchain. It's all you heard. And then now it's like, but what's it actually do? How are we actually using it? But you're right. With ESG issues, with scope 3 as well, I think blockchain's got a huge part to play.
Yeah, entirely agree.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, I'm glad you're on that upward curve as well.
Come with me, Scott. Come with me.
I'm right behind you, Rob. Right behind you.
Yeah.
Okay. Look, it's been a tough time for supply and suppliers.
Yes.
What's the best contingency plan for someone who's struggling there?
Hey, I'm not going to give you a silver bullet, but I think you kind of knew if I did, it would be a lie. In that, I think the best, maybe not even contingency plan, the best plan is wherever you are today, start your plan. Don't wait until there's the next crisis, or it makes, or everything's a perfect world. You've got time. Just make the time now, right? So, I don't think there's anyone that's left behind on that, Scott, right? No, everyone's already had that, that fire lit under them. So I imagine most people are already well on the way, right? But, earlier I mentioned about, low cost country then became lowest delivered cost. And now we're talking about people, reshoring or nearshoring again and all this. Is that a trend? Is that, should we have, for every long supply chain, you should have a short supply chain shortcut, etc. Now, people have already done that, Scott. People were doing that. If it was critical to them before, they've already done that. So you had the guy around the corner that was a slightly higher cost, but you knew you could call on him, and you split your supply so that you always had a certain percentage, just keeping them ticking over while you made your savings by having a long term. I think what the challenges that we've brought that have been hitting us at the minute have brought into focus are that sometimes for the easy ones, right? Okay, you wanted to source a machined part. Then you had a local guy and you had a distant guy, and you bought from China or you bought from India or you bought from wherever else, but you balanced the risk.
Yeah.
And what I think has this latest phase has brought to the fore is that idea that can maybe be unlocked by blockchain, to your previous point, that actually diving into the supply chain is much more important to us now. So it might not be the machined part, it might be the raw material, because we haven't got any gas to supply the production site to smelt the raw material, or it might be that the original source of the mined material is in now in the middle of a blooming war zone or whatever. So I think that visibility through the supply chain has really become much more paramount for us, and to get into the supply chains and the into the different tiers of that supply chain in a much more systematic fashion than previously we did before. So I think people are awake now to the idea that the contingency plan is that today you must start to dig through those tiers and look at the associated risks. And there are a number, maybe not in the blockchain example, but a similar example with procurement tech. There have been a number of solutions for that for a number of years, and they're all still relevant. But the excitement for me today is that now there are a lot more digital, there are a lot more digital solutions that are available that don't require a black box 9-month integration activity. Yeah. So that you can just turn on tomorrow. Yeah. And you don't have to buy one. You can buy multiple different sources for all the different pieces that you've got. You just have to go ahead and map out what your landscape looks like. And there will be a solution now. That's in previous times, there probably wasn't a solution. You had to build it yourself. But now, I mean, I don't know, unless you're in a real niche, there is a solution that's already up and running that you can take advantage of today. And you can integrate it very quickly and easily into whatever landscape you've got. And I'd say that most people have already done it, though, Scott. So it's not, I'm not teaching everybody to suck eggs. They're already doing it. And I'd say that I believe that's the right thing for us to be doing right now.
Okay, well, that sounds good. I know we've got a lot of those tech solution providers here at the show and speaking at the show as well. And as you say, if people aren't aware of that already, then there is a problem, right? They should already be aware and using it anyway. Yes. Okay, it feels a bit old-fashioned to be talking about this, but I'm going to talk about supplier scorecards. After all this talk of artificial intelligence and everything else, has the way that you use supplier scorecards changed, and is the criteria for those constantly evolving?
So, when you say it sounds old-fashioned, I would say that actually the interesting thing for me is that Supplier Scorecards is obviously, as a concept, is pretty old. But actually the way we apply it now is really interesting, because to your point about is it constantly evolving, it has always been evolving. But right now, the thing that I like is the iterative loops are much more reactive and responsive based on the fact that they're all digital now. So actually tapping into data, like I do have, even in my current role, we do still have some activities which require the supplier to be creating a report and sending it to us, and then we upload it and off we go. But actually, most of the work that we're doing now, and I imagine it's the same for a lot of the people at the show, most of the work that we're doing is a really dynamic, connected reporting line. So metrics, KPIs, whatever it is, are all immediately available, much more real time. The suppliers are all managing these in a Power BI anyway, or in some other digital solution, which can then be connected to ours, if not live, then pretty quickly. Yeah. So you see that the supplier scorecard for me, I know, at the show, there are a number of people who have great solutions for digital supplier scorecarding, right? And I shouldn't name names, but I've seen a number of them, right? That I'm really interested in, and we are currently working with, and I've worked with in previous organizations. So I know there are a number of people that are doing really interesting things there. But even if it's as simple as their Power BI, and they take an extract and they send it to you, and you put it into your Power BI, and you just manage it internally without someone helping you, you can do that really quickly. You can be really dynamic about, we're seeing a problem developing in this particular area. What data do we have? Do we need new data sources? Do we need to, just improve the way in which we're using the current data sources? The the way in which people can approach supplier scorecarding, I think, given the fact that there's a real leveling of that integration and that capability to share data, I think the digital aspect of that supplier scorecard has really helped us to drive it forward. And so while I agree with you that it can be a dry topic, I think where we're at now, there's really a lot that can be done with it, and it's really something that can be exciting. So we are focused a lot on it at the minute, particularly around the removal of the manual aspect. So, making sure that we're all automated and we're all digital.
Yeah.
But then getting beyond just data, so into insight. Yeah. And I think that's where supplier scorecards can be really interesting, we always did it in the QBRs. Yeah. So everybody did a QBR, and the things that were interesting to the supplier and the things that were interesting to us came to the fore. But now actually I see an automatic prioritization based on the insights that come from the data, whereas we were always interpreting it and putting our own spin on it. The data doesn't lie so much, yeah. Although obviously you can manipulate statistics, but the data's there, and so if you have it set out, you can have that as quite a good basis for your QBR.
Okay, cool. And let's see how we're doing for time. Oh, we're okay. We can take another couple of questions. Okay. Now, you touched on this earlier, Rob, adopting circular supply chains. So what's your experience of this, or how are you adopting circular?
So, well, I'd say that I personally don't have, unfortunately, a great little story to tell you, Scott, about circular supply chains, in that a number of the things that I've been involved with, anything that I've been involved with in terms of categories with, let's say, non-consumed raw materials, yeah, we've already been doing it. I mean, I was with LPG company. We had, gas bottles made out of metal. They were, maybe not perfectly circular, but they pretty much were, because they never went away, right? They were, even if it ended up down the back of someone's shed and then they ended up using it for a wood burner or whatever it was they did with it, they were pretty circular. And that, I'd say those aspects of the traditional categories and materials, people are doing things that are really interesting. I already mentioned that idea of battery materials and the evolution of ESG driving us to be more creative about the way in which we look at the circularity of other materials. I'm really interested in that piece. Even the actually, when I said non-consumed materials, even the consumed materials, you used to have, I think back to when I was at GSK, even way back, then you say, well, they had originally Horlicks. Yeah, okay, Horlicks was, of course, a waste product from brewing that then said, okay, here we've got malt, and then we've got Horlicks, and we've got Maltesers down the road. And there was circularity already, and tapping into that and making sure that your waste products were actually just byproducts, and that you made sure that you were using them. Of course, that was semi-circularity. But I'm really encouraged by the digitization and automation and our ability to drive traceability in ESG that will encourage people to be able to understand and map more readily their circularity and to globalize it. Whereas if I take that GSK example, okay, there was brewing, then there was Horlicks, then there was Maltesers, and they were all using the byproducts and in innovative ways, but of course they were all right next to each other. Yeah, and I think the digitization really gives a much more global approach to that circularity. And so certainly in the world I'm now in, of course, we're looking at every opportunity we can for circularity. And I'd say that focus on ESG really drives towards that. But I don't have a really great example of, hey, this is something we've just done today to talk to you about, Scott. I'd say it's more implementing it into our thinking process and the way in which we approach things that is the real push for me, especially in, like, obviously I'm in digital. Right. So in IT, of course, we're looking at circularity in any hardware that we've got. We've already implemented that, but I think most people have. Yeah, people aren't, particularly when you start talking about chip shortages, people aren't throwing away hardware. Yeah, they're making sure that they're buying recycled and they're recycling wherever they can, and they're keeping it circular. But I'd say more broadly across procurement as an organization within the company, we're of course continuing to embed circularity in everything. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. And yeah, I've got no problem with you not having a perfect example of a case study that you're currently doing.
Well, the good news is this isn't a job interview, Scott, right? It's just an interview.
Yeah, exactly. This is just insights, share of our audience. Okay, one final question for you, Rob, and you sort of touched on this earlier as well. But what is the single best piece of advice that you would give when it comes to strategic sourcing in the next 2 to 3 years?
So it's not a new thing. It's not, it's not maybe changing things too much for people. But I would say it's being very clear about what strategic sourcing actually means to you. So strategic sourcing all the way through from 3 bids and a buy to actual partnership, or I'd say real partnership, where your organization's strategy and the vendor or partner's strategy are so symbiotic that you cannot, like one cannot exist without the other. Yeah, there's a real range. And so being very specific about what it means to you. Do you exclude partnerships and you deal with them separately and you say strategic sourcing is this piece? Yeah. So partnerships are so fundamental that we're not going to, do all the 4-box matrices and the category strategies, etc., and drive that strategic sourcing, or is it part of it? And then as a second part of that, once you're clear about what it means to you, being very focused on what you will do and what you won't do and what you will prioritize, because that will change. Yeah, it will change as as things evolve and crises happen and things change. But we all know, particularly through these crises that we've had now, that you cannot deal with everything at once. So that prioritization and a focus on, whether you call it prioritization, opportunity analysis, whatever, that focus on those pieces, I think, is the real fundamental for the next couple of years, is to say, you draw it up today, be aware it will change, but make sure that you are clear on what is important to you and therefore which part of it you prioritize. And that, I think, whether it's in strategic sourcing, in the creation of category strategies, in the focus on digitization, etc., is really what I'm focused on for the next 2 to 3 years. And I think it should be the same for us all.
Okay, that's brilliant. I think that's sound advice, Rob. That's all we've got time for, unfortunately. We could have spoken for hours about all this. But no, brilliant session. Really appreciate that. Thanks, Rob, for joining us. And thanks for joining us at the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Okay, stay tuned, everyone. We'll be right back with the next session in just a few minutes.